Tuesday nights were always a little hectic, especially the second Tuesday of every month. That was the night of my Kana's club meeting, which ran from 6:30 to whenever it may end. I usually didn't get home until around 11 o'clock or sometimes even after midnight. My schedule was already tight, as I typically got home from work between 5 o'clock and 5:30. Fortunately, I didn't have to worry about dinner on these nights since Kana's was a dinner meeting. However, there was always some small task that May, my wife of 4 years, needed me to handle before I could leave. The real challenge, though, was leaving May. According to her, my leaving was entirely my doing. She was 3 months pregnant, and her hormones were in overdrive. Despite her condition, or perhaps because of it, she was as much of a dreamboat as the day I married her. Now, with the added mother-to-be glow, it was even harder to tear myself away from her, even for one evening. She was just right to me. 5 feet 3 inches tall with a beautifully proportioned 110-pound frame, light brown hair, and striking blue eyes. Her figure fit me perfectly, and while I loved her for so much more than her looks, I'd be lying if I said her beauty didn't make things harder. She was funny, smart, and incredibly observant, qualities that endeared her to me even more. But when it came time for me to leave, the temptation to stay was overwhelming. I had to leave by 6:10 to make it to the meeting on time. That meant running through my usual routine. A quick shower, getting dressed, kissing my wife, and heading out the door. Tonight didn't seem like it would be any different. After my shower, I threw on a pair of slacks and a sports shirt, grabbed my briefcase, and walked through the kitchen to the garage. As I passed her, I kissed her on the back of the neck and gave her a little squeeze to steady her. She always wobbled when I kissed her there. It was a sweet little quirk of hers. Then I stepped out into the garage, taking a final glance back at her. It was so tempting to skip the meeting altogether. Not only did I want to stay with her, but I also had a project in the garage I was eager to finish. I had been working on installing a baby monitor system for the nursery, and I figured another 30 minutes would be enough to wrap it up. I couldn't wait to show it off to May. She was always so appreciative of my little projects. Truth be told, I didn't mind soaking up her compliments. After all, I was a guy, and I loved it when she stroked my ego. Climbing into the car, I pressed the garage door opener and started the engine. While the car warmed up, I set my briefcase on the seat next to me and double-checked that I had everything. Cell phone, calculator, notebook, check. I backed out of the garage, waving to May, who was standing at the kitchen window doing the dishes. She waved back as I reached the street. Just as I was about to shift into gear and close the garage door, my cell phone rang. I paused to answer it. "Hello," I said, glancing up at the kitchen window. May had already disappeared from view. "Gary," came the voice on the other end. "Glad I caught you. The meeting tonight is off. Our good President Patrick, along with Everett and J. Wes, have all been called out of town. So, with the president, treasurer, and secretary gone, we figured it'd be best to cancel this month's meeting. Nothing scheduled unless you've got something urgent." Needless to say, I was thrilled to have the night off. I immediately pulled back into the garage, thinking how surprised May would be later when she realized I hadn't left. If she wasn't in the kitchen, she wouldn't have heard me drive back in. After closing the garage door, I sat in the car for a few moments, just relaxing. I decided I'd call for pizza tonight instead of making her cook or going through the trouble myself. With that settled, I figured I'd use the extra time to finish up the baby monitor project. The system was nearly complete. Everything in the nursery itself was done except for a few connections in the garage and some final testing. I had mounted the camera in a corner of the nursery 10 days ago, and it was so small that May hadn't even noticed it yet. The idea for the monitor had come from a casual comment she'd made about how nice it would be to have a way to check on the baby without constantly walking to the nursery. That gave me the inspiration to wire the house with sound monitors for every room. The video monitor in the nursery had been a spur-of-the-moment addition after a friend offered me some gear he was getting rid of. The master controls were installed in our bedroom, but since I spent so much time in my garage workshop, I added a second master station there. This setup included speakers and an old TV I repurposed as the video monitor. The system was flexible enough to allow me to monitor the nursery from anywhere in the house. With only a little tuning left to do, I was excited to finish the project and surprise May. She always appreciated these little efforts of mine, and her joy made every second of work worthwhile. I decided to see if I could get the work done before settling in for the night. Maybe I'd collapse in front of the TV or, better yet, I'd collapse on May. That thought sounded even nicer. I slipped out of the car and started checking my work on the baby monitor system. It took me about 20 minutes to get everything running smoothly, so I began testing the sound feeds. Each feed could be toggled on and off individually, or I could run all of them through the 5 second-hand speakers I had set up above my little workspace in the garage. I tested each speaker separately, starting with the living room. Everything worked perfectly. The system was so sensitive that, when I tested the speaker for the master bedroom, I could hear May taking a shower in the bathroom. Satisfied, I switched all the feeds to live mode, piping the audio into the garage. Then, I turned my attention to finishing the connections for the video monitor. As I worked through the wiring, I heard something on the living room speaker. It sounded like May talking on the phone. Curious to see how well the system captured voices, I turned up the volume. Her voice came through crystal clear, a testament to the $20 I'd spent on those speakers. It was worth every penny. "Roger, it's May," I heard her say. "If you can be here by 7 o'clock, it's on, lover." "What? Okay, love. I'll see you then." "Don't you dare be late," came a man's reply. "We won't have nearly enough time as it is. And no, don't think you're getting a repeat." There was a pause, followed by the sound of laughter, and then the call ended. What the hell was that? Who is Roger? The only Roger I knew was Roger Jenkins. His wife, Crystal, had been May's roommate in college, and the two women were still close friends. Roger and I got along pretty well too. He was a big guy, a lot of fun, and I knew that he and May had gone on a few dates before he and Crystal had started seeing each other. Over the years, we'd spent a lot of time together, dinners, picnics, and casual hangouts. May had told me plenty of wild stories about her and Crystal's college days, but she'd always reassured me there was nothing I needed to worry about. I shrugged off the phone call, assuming it was some kind of surprise they were planning for Crystal. I'd find out soon enough. 7 o'clock was only 15 minutes away. Letting go of my suspicions, I flipped on the camera for the baby's room and sat back, smiling at how well the system worked. The monitor showed the room perfectly. At the moment, it was still set up as a spare bedroom, and the camera was focused on the queen-sized bed. I noticed the bed was made and the sheets were neatly turned down. That was unusual. May never made the bed unless we were expecting guests. Curious, I played with the camera controls, zooming in and out. At the widest angle, the entire room was visible except for the corner where the camera was mounted near the ceiling. The picture was crystal clear, with the bed centered perfectly. Feeling satisfied with my work, I left the controls as they were and began cleaning up my workbench. I grabbed a beer from the old refrigerator and leaned back in my $50 recliner. The one May wouldn't let in the house, but that fit perfectly in the garage. I was finishing my beer and thinking about ordering pizza to surprise May when I heard the doorbell ring. A second later, the front door opened, and I heard May's voice. "Hey, I've had a hard time waiting. Come on in, Roger. We have until 10:30, and then it's over. But until then, I'm yours, all the way. I froze, the beer halfway to my lips. I wasn't just stunned by her words. I was shocked by her tone. That husky, sultry voice was one I'd only ever heard her use with me, either in the bedroom or on our way there. It was her doomy voice. I choked on the last mouthful of beer and sat bolt upright. Over the speaker, I heard the front door close. Damn, Roger. May's voice came again. From the look and feel of this bulge in your pants, I'm not the only one who's had a hard time waiting. Looks really good. Come here, honey. Give me a real hello. I heard Roger's voice, muffled and indistinct, followed by several seconds of near silence. Then there were faint grunts and moans, as though they were kissing or something worse. Not here, May whispered. Come on, back to our room. I've got it all set up for us. Our room. I felt sick. My stomach churned, and my head swam. Was this really happening? Couldn't be. May loved me and I loved her. We were happy, weren't we? I had always been faithful to her, and I was certain she had been just as faithful to me. For a moment, I thought about bursting through the door and confronting them. But then I hesitated. What was actually going on? Could I have misunderstood? I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself, but my mind raced. I told myself it had to be a misunderstanding. It had to be. I couldn't let my mind go where it was trying to take me. I loved May, and she loved me. We were best friends. She was carrying my child. For God's sake. We were compatible in every way, including as lovers. She never lacked for anything when we were together, and I always made sure she was satisfied before I even thought about myself. May was used to multiple climaxes, and I never finished until I was certain she didn't need or want more. There was no way this could be real. It had to be a mistake. I was still trying to calm myself down when my eyes caught movement on the monitor showing the baby's room. The door opened, and May gently pushed Roger inside. My heart sank as I watched her guide him around to the far side of the bed, between the bed and the window. She then moved back to the other side, standing in front of the closed closet doors, her gaze fixed on him. It was like she was looking directly into the camera, directly at me. She was wearing her old, worn-out, ratty Saturday robe, the one that barely reached mid-thigh. Despite the robe's shabby state, she had styled her hair into a sophisticated bun, which emphasized the elegant curve of her neck. She'd applied just the right amount of makeup, giving her the appearance of a princess awaiting her prince, except for the worn-out robe. On her feet were the high-heeled slippers I'd bought her for her birthday 2 months ago. She'd worn them the night I gave them to her, and I'd told her how much they emphasized her incredible legs. I hadn't seen them out of her closet since then. That thought hit me like a gut punch. I hadn't seen those slippers since her birthday, and now here she was wearing them. For him, I felt tears welling up. This couldn't be happening. It just couldn't. May stood tall and proud on her side of the bed, looking straight at Roger. Slowly, she raised her hands to the throat of her robe. Using her left hand to hold it closed, she began undoing the buttons one by one with her right hand. Each fastener came undone with agonizing slowness, teasing Roger with brief glimpses of what lay beneath. When the last button was undone, she continued holding the robe closed for a moment, then used both hands to peel it open, revealing herself. For a second, she stood there, framed by the robe, letting Roger admire her. Then, with a slight shrug, she let the robe slide off her shoulders, pooling around her feet. She was wearing the lingerie I had given her on Valentine's Day, the same set she had modeled for me once but hadn't worn since. Still locking eyes with Roger, she held up her hand and crooked her finger, beckoning him to come to her. He hesitated for a moment, then started moving around the bed. His face came into view on the monitor, and I saw the stunned expression on it. "May," he stammered. I was expecting to be with you tonight, but you've made this really special for me. God, you're beautiful. I felt like my heart had been ripped out of my chest. I couldn't look away as they began undressing each other. It was happening right in front of me. Suddenly, I snapped out of my daze. No matter how this ended, I was going to need proof. Acting quickly, I left the garage and hurried into the living room, making as little noise as possible. I grabbed a fresh SD card and returned to the garage, inserting it into the monitor's recording system. With shaking hands, I turned the system back on and began recording everything. The screen came alive again, showing Roger and May in each other's arms, moving toward the bed. Through the tears clouding my vision, I saw them fall onto the bed and begin their betrayal in earnest. I felt sick to my stomach as I watched them clasping and grinding against each other, their moans and gasps filling the speakers. It seemed to go on forever. Roger was relentless, driving into her over and over. After about 15 minutes, I saw May try to pull away from Roger. I couldn't take it anymore. I got up and began pacing the garage, unable to think clearly. My first instinct was to storm into the house and throw Roger out, violently if necessary. But I knew if I went in there now, I wouldn't be able to stop myself. Murder would be done. Then I heard May's voice through the speaker. Roger, unless you want Gary to walk in on us, you have to go now. I froze, listening as she bent down to pick up his clothes and handed them to him. She also gathered up the remains of the lingerie she'd been wearing and placed it on the dresser. She threw on her ratty robe and began stripping the sheets off the bed, not even waiting for Roger to finish dressing. She bundled the sheets up and carried them to the washer in the laundry room between the kitchen and the garage. When she returned to the living room, Roger was waiting for her, a smug grin on his face. "Hey, lovely lady," he said with the lilting, bragging tone that men often use after sex. "That was great. We really have to talk about doing it again." "No, Roger," May replied firmly. "I meant it when I said just the once. And only because of our deal. I guess for old times' sake too." "Sure, honey, I understand," Roger said. "But someday you might start thinking about us again. You know, how great it was. Maybe we can try it again." "This was just for once," she said sharply. "I agree. But if you start thinking about it again, don't bother asking." I heard the sound of a sloppy kiss, followed by Roger's footsteps heading toward the door. As Roger left, I could hear the impatience in May's voice and the little sounds she was making, but they didn't fully register at the time. Nor did the exhalation she made when she finally followed him to the door. Feeling physically sick, I lay back in my old recliner, staring at the now empty bedroom on the monitor. Glancing at my watch, I saw it was 10:37. They had kept to their schedule perfectly. I heard Roger murmuring something at the door, and clearly heard May respond, "No, Roger, this was just the one time, and only because of our agreement so many years ago. Gary is my husband, my lover, and the man I want in my life. I'm not even sure why we did this now. Crystal may be okay with this, but she's my best friend. She's more important to me than an affair. Isn't she more important to you?" I couldn't make out Roger's mumble, but I heard another kiss and then the door shutting softly. Almost immediately, I heard the lock click into place. If I hadn't been so overwhelmed with despair and tears, I might have found the exhaustion in Roger's voice after his session with my wife almost funny. But in that moment, there was nothing funny about it. After shutting the door, May reappeared in the spare bedroom. I couldn't even think of it as the baby's room anymore. She moved around the room carefully, making sure nothing was left behind from their tryst. Gathering up her clothes, she left the room and headed to the master bedroom. I heard her shower running shortly after. Then there was silence, followed by the sound of the bed rustling. She had gone to bed. Glancing at my watch again, I saw it was almost 11 o'clock. I just sat there, staring into space. I had no idea where my life or my marriage was headed from here. I was utterly heartbroken. Thoughts raced through my head, some of them searching for excuses for May's behavior, others rejecting those excuses outright. And then, there were the darker thoughts. What had I done to push May into the arms of another man? Why would she need someone else? Sometime after midnight, I wearily stood up and turned off the electronics. Entering the house through the garage door, I walked directly to the master bedroom, passing the spare room where May had been with Roger. I glanced inside. It looked just as I had last seen it on Monday evening. The bed was stripped, and everything seemed perfectly in place, as though nothing had happened. Groaning softly, I entered the master bedroom. May was asleep, or at least pretending to be. Glancing at her peaceful face, I went into the bathroom to brush my teeth and use the toilet. Stripping off my clothes, I opened the hamper to drop them in. It was empty. There was no sign of any soiled lingerie, and no evidence of what had taken place. Climbing into bed, May rolled over and threw an arm over me. Sleepily, she asked, "How was your night?" After a moment of silence, I finally replied, "Traumatic. I'll tell you about it later." Usually, she would snuggle up to me, but tonight she simply pulled her arm back, rolled over with her back to me, and lay quietly. Though her breathing was steady, I was certain she was still awake. I turned away from her and stared into the darkness. I couldn't remember falling asleep that night. If I did, it wasn't restful. When the alarm went off in the morning, I just lay there. I wasn't in any shape to go to work, so I called in sick, claiming I had the flu. I stayed in bed until I heard May leave for work. Once I was alone, I got up and began searching her dresser drawers. I was careful not to disturb anything as I went through them. In the bottom drawer, folded and stored in a paper bag beneath some sweaters, I found the lingerie. The panties were still damp. After calling my boss again to officially take the day off, I retrieved the tape I had made the night before. At first, I simply skipped through it, not wanting to relive the experience but needing to ensure the footage was usable. As I reviewed it, I began to notice things I had missed in the heat of the moment. I spent the entire morning studying the video, dissecting every detail it held. Once I was certain the footage was intact, I made 2 copies and then made 2 calls. By the time I finished, it was early afternoon, and I realized I hadn't eaten since lunch the previous day. I had skipped dinner the night before, and the thought of breakfast that morning had turned my stomach. My appetite was non-existent, and the nausea remained. May came home at her usual time, around 4:30. When she walked in and leaned down to give me a kiss, I turned my head, and she ended up kissing my cheek instead. She gave me a strange look but said nothing. Finally, around 5:30, I decided there was no point in delaying any further. "May, I'd like to show you what I've been working on for the baby monitor system we talked about. Do you have a few minutes?" I asked. She hesitated for a moment. "Can you wait until after dinner? I'm just about to put it on," May answered when I asked her to come see what I'd been working on. Picking up my cell phone, I asked her what she wanted to eat. She smiled and suggested Chinese, so I ordered it for delivery. While we waited, I took her into the bedroom and showed her the controls for the baby monitor system. The console was set up neatly in the corner behind the door. I turned on the sound and left her in the bedroom while I went from room to room, speaking to her over the monitor. Of course, she couldn't answer me directly, but when I returned to the bedroom, the smile on her face told me she understood and that the system was working even better than we had planned. Turning on the video portion of the monitor, I asked her to wait and watch for a moment. Leaving her in the bedroom, I stepped into the spare room and stood exactly where she had stood the night before. My mind flashed back to the images of her and Roger. Their lingering gazes, the slow teasing, the intimate betrayal. Steeling myself, I returned to the bedroom. She enthused, "Gary, that's perfect. When did you get this going?" "This afternoon," I said evenly. Then I added, "Actually, May, I got it going last night." Her smile faltered slightly, replaced by a puzzled expression. I could see her trying to piece together when I could have possibly had the time to finish it. "Like I said last night," I repeated. "One more thing to show you." Taking her hand, I led her to the garage. "I spend a lot of time here, so I thought it'd be a good idea to have a monitoring station out here, too. That way, you can keep an eye on the baby if you ever need to go out." She nodded, still smiling, as I turned on the system in the garage. Then I added, "There's one more feature I added last night. Let me show you how it works." Sliding a USB drive into the TV connected to the monitor, I told her, "Watch the bedroom and see what happens." The monitor initially showed the same view from the baby's room that we had seen earlier, the empty bed in the spare room. Then, I used the remote to play the video from the previous night. The picture immediately changed, and the screen showed May kneeling in front of Roger. I glanced at her face. The color had drained from her cheeks, and she swayed slightly before catching her balance. Her wide eyes darted to me, searching for an explanation, but I said nothing. I simply fast-forwarded the footage a few seconds and gestured for her to keep watching. When she turned back to the screen, she saw Roger grabbing at her panties. Although there was no sound, we both could see her mouth move, saying something to him. A moment later, the video showed her giving a small scream, one I now recognized as pain. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed tears streaming down her face, and I saw her cringe when Roger roughly drove himself into her. I paused the video. "Do you want to see more?" I asked quietly. May just looked at me, helpless and trembling, unable to speak. "Come into the house, May," I said firmly. "We need to talk. I don't know where this is going." Leading her into the kitchen, I sat her at the table, taking the seat at the end beside her. She couldn't seem to meet my eyes. "I can explain," she mumbled, tears still falling. "That's exactly what I need. An explanation," I said. "What's the explanation, May? Why?" She wiped at her face but didn't look up. "This goes back to college," she began haltingly, her voice shaky, "to a promise I made to Roger one night." "How many years ago did you promise yourself to him, May?" I asked coldly. "No, Gary, it wasn't like that," she insisted. "We were both drunk. Roger and I had been dating. He and I were an item, sort of. He was a hunk and I liked him for a while. I even wondered if he might be the one. Everyone thought we were serious, but I didn't want to commit, and he never really pushed for us to be intimate. He had a reputation, though, as a lady killer." She paused for a moment, taking a shaky breath. "When I started rooming with Crystal, he began dating her too. For a while, he was going out with both of us, though I guess Crystal and he ended up in bed pretty quickly after they started dating. Nothing serious ever happened between Roger and me after that, but he and Crystal were heading toward what they have now." I nodded stiffly, motioning for her to continue. "Roger had this reputation among the co-eds," she said. "There was a lot of competition to get a one-night stand with him. He was supposed to be pretty special in bed. I wasn't a virgin. I told you that. But I was very particular about who I slept with." May hesitated, wringing her hands. "One night, Roger and I were in my room, sharing drinks while we waited for Crystal to come back from whatever she was doing. We started talking, and as we drank more, the conversation turned more risque. Somehow, I told Roger the only reason we hadn't been intimate was my fear of getting pregnant. She looked at me with pleading eyes. "That wasn't the only reason, Gary," but it was one I gave him. And the truth is, he'd turned me on pretty hard on a few occasions. Roger had this thing, he never used condoms. He expected his partners to be on the pill. I don't even know how it happened, but I told him that if there were no chance of me getting pregnant, I'd let him have me. Her voice broke, and she began sobbing. I don't know why I said it. I don't know what I was thinking. It was stupid, and I never thought he'd take it seriously. Anyway, May continued, we got to arguing, and after a while, I grabbed a piece of paper and wrote a promissory note. I told Roger that if I could be absolutely sure he couldn't get me pregnant, I'd spend an evening in bed with him. She paused, glancing at me, gauging my reaction. I just stared at her, incredulous. How long ago was this? I asked, my voice cold. About 6 years, she replied softly. May went on to tell me that the note had become a long-running joke between her and Roger. It was something they'd teased each other about over the years. Then, 2 weeks ago, when we shared the news of her pregnancy with Roger and Crystal, everything changed. After the initial congratulations, Roger and I had gone into their garage to check out a problem he was having. While we were outside, Crystal had looked May in the eye and said, well, I guess that promissory note is due now. May had been shocked. Not just that Crystal knew about it, but that she seemed to be taking it seriously. Before May could react, Crystal pressed her, insisting it was time to honor the agreement. May had tried to dismiss it, but Crystal wouldn't let it go. When Roger and I came back into the room, I had remembered a case of Dutch beer I'd planned to bring to the cookout. Thinking nothing of it, I left the three of them and went home alone to grab it. In the brief time I was gone, Crystal had raised the topic again. May was stunned to find out that not only did Roger believe the note would be honored, but he was indignant at the thought of her backing out. This conversation had taken place after 3 hours of steady drinking, the last drinks May planned to have until after breastfeeding our baby. Feeling cornered and pressured, May found herself agreeing to honor the old note before I returned with the beer. It was decided between the three of them that she would entertain Roger last night. May's voice faltered as she finished. Gary, that's one of the strangest stories I've ever heard, and it's really hard for me to accept, I said slowly, choosing my words carefully. I have to ask you this. Who is the father of the baby we're expecting? May shrank back as if I had slapped her, and tears began streaming down her face again. How many other notes like this are outstanding? I asked, my voice tightening. And how many have you paid up on? None, Gary, she screamed, her voice cracking. Don't. I love you, Gary. This happened, yes, but it's the only time. Can't happen again. Please believe me. Please, Gary. She fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably, her face buried in her hands. May, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. Please, can I ask you some questions? Will you be honest with me? Yes, Gary, she said through her tears. Ask me anything. I'll tell you the truth. This was a one-time thing, you say? Something you didn't want to do, I asked. But somehow you still went through with it. How does that make sense? Her voice was raw and trembling. It was a one-time thing. It's not something I wanted to do. Gary, it feels incredible to me now, even thinking about it. But you are worth more to me than my own life. I looked down at her, kneeling before me, her tears pooling on the floor. My heart felt like it was breaking into pieces. This was my wife. My best friend, the person I had planned to spend the rest of my life with. But I had to know if she was still the woman I thought she was. May, I said softly, could you have said no? Yes, she whispered. Yes, I could have, but I felt my honor was involved. I was afraid to tell you, afraid you wouldn't understand. I thought, I thought if you were in my place, you would have done the same thing. I blinked at her, stunned. May, I said slowly, when you made that promise, you were drunk. But when you sobered up, you didn't throw the note away. You kept it. And when the time came, you still chose to honor it. Why? She took a deep breath, looking at the floor. When the agreement was made, I didn't know you. I didn't know you existed. It wasn't something I did to cheat on you, Gary. It was something I promised to a friend, someone who was very important to me at the time. Back then, in that place, it felt right. I shook my head, trying to process what she was saying. So, after all these years, you still felt you owed that debt to the man your friend had become? Yes, she said softly. I studied her face carefully. May, over the past 2 weeks, since this was arranged, were you looking forward to it? She took a deep breath, her voice trembling. No, Gary, I wasn't. It wasn't something I wanted to do. It was something I felt I had to do. It was an obligation, not a pleasure. I kept looking at her, my silence pressing her to continue. She lowered her head and whispered, Okay, yes, Gary. I guess I was looking forward to it, but not the way you're thinking. I've never even thought about cheating on you, never wanted to. But this came up, and I felt like I had to go through with it. And if I had to do it, I saw no reason not to make it special. I told myself it was a one-time thing and that nothing like it would ever happen again. I took a deep, shuddering breath, letting it out slowly. May, I said carefully, do you remember about 6 weeks ago, when I called you on my way back from that conference? We teased each other over the phone, and I asked if you wanted to meet me at the Holiday Inn in Erin. I suggested we make a weekend of it, just the two of us, away from home. Maybe do some hanky-panky. I think I actually used those words, I said, watching her closely. Do you remember? Sure, Gary. It was a great weekend too, she answered, offering a small, tremulous smile. Did you want to make it a great weekend for us? For me? I asked, my tone measured. What kind of question is that? Of course I did, and it was. We had a great time, she replied, this time managing a real smile. Do you remember what you packed for that weekend, honey? I asked, my voice steady but pointed. Well, not really. I took a nice dress in case we wanted to go dancing, and we did, and some comfortable clothes to walk in. Her voice trailed off as confusion began to creep across her face. Just a minute, I interrupted. I need to turn the video back on to help you understand what this question is about. I stood and walked back toward the bedroom. Halfway down the hall, I turned to make sure she was following me, and she was. Once inside, I turned on the bedroom TV and hit play on the remote. The video opened with her kneeling before Roger, and then transitioned to her standing by the bed, facing directly into the camera in the corner, fully visible in the white lingerie she'd worn. May, I said, my voice heavy, what in the world are you wearing there? She blushed deeply and mumbled, my white lingerie. Yeah, the set I bought you for Valentine's Day. Do you realize you've never worn it for me? Except to model it the day I gave it to you. Well, sure, Gary, she stammered. But there's been no occasion for it. Her voice trailed off as her expression shifted to one of confusion. You sure didn't wear it at the Holiday Inn, I said firmly. I would have remembered that. As I recall, you had gone home and changed into a peasant skirt and that white blouse with the buttons at the neck. Later, after dinner when we decided to go dancing, you were wearing those plain white cotton panties and the bra you probably have on now. Do you remember what you wore to bed that night? In a small, barely audible voice, she answered, my Donald Duck t-shirt. Looking her in the eye, I pressed, May, you just told me that the holiday and weekend was special, and the night with Roger wasn't. Yet there you are, dressed in the sexiest thing you own. something I bought for us, and you wore it for Roger but not for me. What does that say to you? What does that shout to me? How special do you think I feel right now? May just stared at me, her shoulders slumping slightly. Honey, I continued, trying to keep my voice steady. If I didn't love you, we wouldn't still be living in this house together. If I didn't think you were special to me, we wouldn't still be married. But last night, I get an unexpected phone call canceling my meeting, and I stumble into one of the worst nightmares I could imagine. I paused, letting my words sink in. Roger, one of my best friends, if not my very best friend, shows up at our house when I should have been at my meeting. He's met at the door by my wife, who takes him back to a room she's prepared specifically for their tryst. Then, I see her give him a damn good striptease, dressed in something I haven't seen her wear in years. Something meant for us. You even put your hair up, did your makeup, wore heels. All things you haven't done for me in God knows how long. I shook my head, my voice growing heavier with each word. That tells me this night was very important to you. Important enough to prepare for it like it was a treat. But what does that say about the time you spend with me? Tells me that my time with you is ordinary. Lesser. That you wanted to treat Roger, but not me. Your husband. Your partner. I saw you do things for Roger that you only do for me on special occasions, and even some things you've outright refused to do for me. May blinked rapidly, tears streaming down her face. Gary, she said softly. It wasn't like that. It really wasn't. I love you. You're special to me. What can I do to convince you? I sat on the bed and looked at her. I don't know, May, I said after a long pause. I don't know what we can do. She knelt in front of me, still crying, her hands clenched into fists on her lap. I took a deep breath and said, I'm calling Roger and Crystal and asking them to come over tonight. From what you've said, Crystal already knows what's been going on. I need to know if there's more to this, if they had anything else on their minds when this was planned. May shook her head weakly. No, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded and dialed Roger and Crystal's number. Crystal answered, and I asked if they could come over for a few minutes that evening. As I spoke, May went to the door to collect the Chinese food we had ordered earlier. Neither of us was hungry, but I forced myself to eat. I knew it was going to be a long night, and the emotions were only beginning. May sat across from me, barely touching her food, idly toying with it as if she didn't know what else to do. At one point, she repeated softly, Gary, I love you. This was just a one-time thing. For a brief moment, I almost believed her. Almost. The doorbell rang at 7:15, breaking the tense silence between us. Before I opened the door, I took a deep breath, bracing myself for the conversation ahead. I told May, before opening the door, that I believed there was more to this situation than she understood. When I let Roger and Crystal in, they both smiled at me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that each smile had an extra layer to it. A little too knowing, a little too smug. Roger, in particular, gave my wife a look that felt almost proprietary, and I noticed May cringe slightly when she saw it. After ushering them into the living room, I gestured for everyone to sit down. I asked May to take a seat on the couch beside Crystal, but she chose instead to sit in a recliner to the side of the couch. Her body language was defensive, and I could tell she was bracing herself for what was coming. Crystal and Roger, meanwhile, appeared puzzled, though Crystal had a faint smirk on her lips, like she thought she knew more than the rest of us. I hemmed and hawed for a few moments, rambling about random topics, including the new monitoring system I'd been working on in the house. I didn't mention that it had been operational or what it had shown me the night before. As I continued, Crystal and Roger exchanged glances, clearly wondering why they'd been called over. Finally, I joked, I'd better get to the point before my audience decides to walk out on me. With that, I offered everyone a drink. I knew exactly what each of them preferred. After all, we'd been friends for years, and handed them their drinks. White wine for Crystal, Jack, and 7-Up for Roger, a waste of good liquor, in my opinion, and orange juice for May, who was still being mindful of her pregnancy. For myself, I poured what looked like a gin and tonic but was actually just straight tonic water. I needed to keep my wits about me tonight. Taking my drink, I sat down on the ottoman in front of the TV, leaning forward with my elbows on my knees, my hands cradling the glass between them. I looked around the room, my gaze landing on each person before finally settling on Crystal. "What was in it for you, Crystal?" I asked bluntly. She frowned, her confusion genuine. "What was what, Gary? What are you talking about?" "Last night, Crystal. Why did you work so hard to set it up?" As I finished speaking, Roger sputtered and choked on his drink, his face going pale. I turned to him. "Roger, I know what you got out of it. But was that all? Seems to me there must be more to this." I shifted my gaze between the two women as I continued. "Roger, I know your reputation as a playboy. One more notch on your belt doesn't seem worth the risk you were taking. So, tell me, Roger, why?" Gary," he stammered, his voice unsteady. "What are you talking about?" I leaned back slightly, letting the weight of my words sink in. "Well, you see," I said, "I was home last night. The meeting was canceled, and I was in the garage when you made your appointment with May. I was still there when you arrived." Crystal and Roger exchanged quick, nervous glances, and I noticed May burying her face in her hands. "Let me show you something," I said, walking over to the TV. I turned it on and flipped to the live feed from the spare room's camera. "This is the setup I've been working on. Pretty good picture, isn't it?" The room fell into stunned silence. Roger's face went pale, Crystal's smirk faltered, and May looked like she wanted to disappear. "So," I continued, my voice steady, "what was this all about?" Crystal crossed her legs, her foot bouncing slightly in what I assumed was a nervous tic. She recovered quickly, though, and with a small, teasing smile, she asked, "What do you think it was about, Gary?" "Well, Crystal," I replied, "you've got a bit of a reputation yourself. Actually, it goes hand in hand with Roger's. You two have always been a little adventurous. I've heard a couple of things over the years, little comments here and there, and I always brushed them off. But now I'm wondering if I should have paid more attention." Crystal's smile returned, a little sharper this time. "This wasn't exactly how we wanted to bring it up. But yeah, Gary, you're right. I think it's time we had a talk." I turned to May, who looked utterly lost. "May," I said gently, "up to now, I thought you might have been aware of this. But now I'm not so sure. Let me explain." I took a deep breath and looked back at Crystal and Roger. "As I understand it, you two have been part of a kind of key club for the past couple of years. I don't know how often, but every so often, a group of you gets together on a Friday night. You meet in a back room at Barney's Broiler for dinner, and every couple brings one of their house keys. The keys are tagged with the address and dropped into a big barrel, kind of like a bingo drum." I paused, watching their reactions. Crystal's foot was still bouncing, but her expression didn't falter. Roger, on the other hand, looked like he wished he were anywhere but here. "After dinner," I continued, "the wives leave, driving back to their own homes. They get ready for some action, I suppose. Meanwhile, the husbands draw keys from the barrel. The idea is that whoever's key you pull is where you go for the night." Crystal interrupted, her tone casual. "Well, not exactly, Gary. If a man pulls his own key, he has to draw again. And if he pulls a key for someone he's been with recently, or someone he doesn't want to be with for whatever reason, he gets one redraw. But that's it." I turned back to May, who looked like she'd been struck by lightning. So there you have it, May. Your best friend and her husband are swingers. And last night, when you thought you were fulfilling some silly old promise, you were actually stepping into their world. Now, the question is, was this really just a one-time thing? May's voice was barely a whisper. Gary, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Crystal leaned forward slightly, her tone still calm but more serious. Gary, I don't know what you're trying to accomplish here, but no one forced May into anything. She agreed. I glanced at May, whose face was buried in her hands again. Is that true? I asked softly. May didn't answer. Twice. If a guy pulls his wife's key the second time, he's out of luck. And I hear some guys have really gotten into trouble for showing up to their own house when their wife was expecting action from someone else. Anyway, after the guys pick their keys, they all have a drink before heading off to their rendezvous for the weekend. Yes, the whole weekend, not just a couple of hours or a night. I paused, letting my words sink in, glancing at each of them in turn. Crystal kept her little smirk, her foot bouncing more rapidly now, while Roger seemed smug, almost relieved that I hadn't blown up yet. May, however, was staring at me, her eyes wide with shock, her mouth slightly open as if trying to process what I was saying. I've even heard comments from some of the guys at work wondering when I was going to join the club, I continued. Apparently, because we're so close with you two, everyone assumed we were already swapping on the side. A lot of the guys wanted a shot at May. It wasn't just Roger here. The room went silent. I let the quiet stretch, the tension thickening as I looked at each of them again. May was gaping at me, clearly horrified by what I had just said. Crystal, still with that same smirk, seemed unfazed, though her bouncing foot betrayed her nerves. Roger, on the other hand, looked entirely too pleased with himself, a smug, self-satisfied grin plastered across his face. Honey, I began, looking back at May. Before we go any further, I think you should know something about your lover from last night. May's face went pale again at my words. She looked like she wanted to disappear. As you saw last night, Roger is pretty well endowed, I said bluntly, watching her reaction. Her face turned bright red, and she buried it in her hands. Roger, meanwhile, looked even more smug, flashing one of the most obnoxious grins I'd ever seen. I continued, Roger is the prize at these key drawings. As I understand it, all the wives hold their breath, waiting to see if they get to take the blue-blooded stud home for the weekend. Just like you described with the co-eds in college, May. Roger's smirk deepened, and Crystal glanced at May with a knowing grin. May, on the other hand, looked like she was sinking into her chair, her face a sickly shade of white. I leaned back a bit, taking a long drink of my tonic water. It tasted bitter, but no more bitter than the situation we were in. I stayed quiet, letting the silence build again. Roger still looked insufferably pleased with himself, but Crystal seemed like she had something to say. I decided to wait her out. Finally, Crystal broke the silence. Gary, she began, it's really a pretty good deal. All we do is add a little spice to our marriage. You know, after a while, everyone gets a little stale, a little tired of one another. This just keeps things fresh. She glanced at Roger, who nodded with that same ridiculous grin, and then back at me. Ask Roger. He hasn't lost any interest in me, and I haven't lost any in him. If anything, we're even closer now. We've added some fun and variation to our lives this way. Isn't that right, Roger? Roger just grinned, as usual, offering nothing of substance. Crystal went on. Anyway, we thought showing you two that loosening up a bit wouldn't break you. It'd actually bring you closer. Your friendship won't be affected, and it might even give you some new ideas for the bedroom. She smiled brightly. No pressure, of course. Just think about it. We're here if you ever decide you want to give it a try. Her tone was so casual, as if she were talking about something as mundane as dinner plans. I could feel May shrinking into herself more and more with every word Crystal said. Keeping my voice calm and steady, I replied, "Well, Crystal, I appreciate your patience with me, but let me make something clear. I haven't discussed this with myself, and I doubt I will. I'm not interested in swapping, and I don't need another sex partner to keep things fresh. My wife and I are intelligent, well-read, imaginative people. We don't need to experiment with others to improve our sex life." Crystal's smirk began to waver, and Roger looked less confident now. I continued, "I believe May and I will enjoy our life together for many years to come, God willing. But there's one thing I need to address, and it might sound like I'm punishing May, though that's not my intention." I turned to May, who was still avoiding my gaze. "Honey," I said softly, "Roger doesn't practice safe sex. I don't know the medical history of his numerous partners, and frankly, I don't want to. What I do know is that you're carrying our child, and we can't take any risks. You'll need to see your doctor and come up with a reason to get tested for STDs. Until you've been tested and cleared, we can't have sex. We can't risk passing something between us, and we certainly can't risk passing anything to our baby. Do you understand?" May nodded weakly, her face streaked with tears. She whispered, "Yes, Gary, I understand." I looked back at Roger and Crystal. "I feel betrayed by both of you. I'm not sure which of you I'm angrier at, but regardless, we'll need to take a break from seeing you for the foreseeable future." Reaching over, I turned off the TV, ejected the USB drive, and handed it to May. She took it with trembling hands and, without a word, grabbed today's newspaper from the end table. Crumpling up several sheets, she placed them in the fireplace, added the USB drive to the pile, and lit a match. Together, we watched the fire smolder and consume the contents. When I turned around, both Roger and Crystal were sitting quietly, their smugness replaced with awkward silence. The mood had shifted entirely, and for the first time that night, I felt like I had regained some control over the situation. "It worked," I muttered to myself, dialing a number on my phone. "Hey Lopez, your package is ready." 3 hours later, at 11 p.m., the doorbell rang. I opened the door and greeted Lopez, who stepped inside, his expression unreadable. "You have something for me?" he asked. I nodded and gestured to the 2 unconscious bodies lying in my living room. Without a word, Lopez stepped back outside and returned moments later with 7 more men. They moved toward Crystal first, lifting her limp body easily. As they turned toward Roger, I held up a hand. "Wait," I said. They froze. I walked upstairs and returned with a baseball bat, gripping it tightly. "I just need a few swings," I told Lopez. He smiled faintly, motioning for his men to lower Roger to the ground. "Go ahead," he said. "Just don't kill him yet." "I know where to hit," I replied coldly, positioning myself. In a few swift moves, I swung the bat with precision, aiming for his kneecaps, his ankles, and finally, his family jewels. Each blow landed with a sickening thud, and though Roger was unconscious, the sound alone was satisfying enough. When I finished, I tossed the bat aside and looked at his crumpled form on the ground. "I wish he were awake," I muttered, my voice ice cold. I wanted to hear him scream. Turning to Lopez, I nodded. "He's all yours now." Without a word, his men lifted Roger's broken body and carried him out. 5 minutes later, Lopez returned alone and sat across from me, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Thanks for the samples," he said. "We needed them." "My pleasure," I replied flatly, staring into the empty space where Roger and Crystal had been. May was still standing in the corner, her face pale, her eyes wide with shock. The cold night air crept into the room, but she didn't seem to notice as she approached me hesitantly. "What happens to them?" she asked quietly, her voice trembling. "They're going to Mexico," I said, my tone devoid of emotion. "There are medical students there who need practice samples." Her hands flew to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. "What if someone comes looking for them?" she whispered. "Lopez will take care of that," I replied, my voice unchanging. "You killed them," she said, her voice cracking. "How can you be so heartless?" I turned to her, my expression cold and unyielding. "You broke my heart, May. You didn't care how I'd feel. You have no right to judge me." She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "You said we'd get back together, that we'd have sex again." "I lied," I said bluntly. "Here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow morning, we'll get a DNA test for the unborn child. We'll wait for the results. If the child is mine, I'll help with the birth, but we won't stay married." Her lips quivered, but I didn't stop. "You won't take any lovers until my son is 10 years old. If you do," I leaned closer, my voice dropping to a whisper, "I'll make sure you're very useful." She flinched, her head dropping in submission. "And tomorrow evening," I continued, "we'll walk to the divorce lawyer and file for divorce. You can keep the house, and I'll provide financial support until you find a job. Do I make myself clear?" May nodded silently, tears still running down her cheeks. She looked at me with a mixture of fear and sorrow. "I never knew you were like this," she whispered. "Neither did I," I replied, standing and walking away. The next day, we filed for divorce. 3 weeks later, the DNA results confirmed that the child was mine. For months after that, our divorce was finalized. 2 months later, my son was born. I devoted all my time and energy to him. Though May and I occasionally met to discuss our son, I could never love her again. She never took another lover, just as I had demanded, and I supported her financially for the next 5 years, until my son could take care of himself. As for myself, I never dated again. All my focus was on my son, ensuring he had the best possible life. Lopez eventually sent me a large thank you gift, a gesture of appreciation I didn't ask for but accepted nonetheless. And as I had predicted, no one ever came looking for the samples I had sent to Mexico. Story 2. I had a peaceful life. Everything about it was like that of an ordinary person. A wife, a child, and a steady job. We had been living together for a long time, and there were no unusual problems or incidents. Many of our friends and acquaintances went through various family battles, infidelity, quarrels, and many other unpleasant moments. Some divorced, while others married or remarried several times. For us, however, everything was different. We lived calmly and harmoniously. Of course, it wasn't always smooth, but we always found a way out of any situation together. I always trusted my wife and never doubted her loyalty. To me, she was my lifelong love, and lately, I had taken that for granted. I thought, like many others, it can happen to anyone, just not to me. I worked in the paint industry, negotiating contracts with other companies for the supply of our products. My job often required me to go on business trips. The work was challenging and the trips were exhausting, but they brought in a good, stable income. My wife, Mindy, also had a challenging job. Her work was somewhat similar to mine, involving pharmaceuticals. Mindy processed orders sent to various clinics and dental offices. We had a son, David, who was already 26 years old. Raising our son wasn't easy, but despite our demanding work schedules, we tried to dedicate as much attention to him as possible. My parents, who lived nearby, also helped us a lot. Together, we raised a wonderful son. David was my pride and joy, He excelled in his studies, found an excellent job in a bank, and was now confidently climbing the career ladder. He had moved out and was living on his own, leaving Mindy and me to live together in our cozy little house. The house we lived in had a special significance to me. I inherited it from my Uncle Thomas. Thomas didn't want to sell the house because he hoped to return to it someday. Instead, he asked us to live in it and take care of it. Thomas never managed to start his own family, but he treated me like a son, which is why he entrusted me with the house. Over the years, Thomas never returned, and we continued to live there. Life was smooth and uneventful. When we weren't working, Mindy and I always made time for each other. We went out to restaurants, took trips into nature, and enjoyed our time together. I didn't want to change anything in my life because, to me, everything was already perfect. But soon, everything changed. It all started after one of my business trips. I met up with my old university friend, Richard, for a couple of beers. Richard had always been a good friend, but that evening he surprised me. He cautiously brought up the topic of my relationship with Mindy. He said it wasn't his business, but he felt compelled to tell me what he had seen. Richard told me that he happened to pass by our house one day and decided to drop in, not knowing I was on a business trip. No one expected his visit. At home, he found Mindy and Albert. Albert was our family dentist. He was quite elderly, and we always got along well. But Richard found it strange that Albert was at our house, alone with Mindy. Then Richard told me something else. He had also seen Mindy and Albert together in a restaurant. Just the two of them. First, I brushed it off. I told Richard it wasn't what he thought. There couldn't possibly be anything between them. Albert was much older, and he had a family which he often talked about. Still, Richard's words planted a seed of doubt in my mind. I started to notice that Mindy had been visiting Albert's dental office more frequently than usual. Finally, I decided to talk to her. "Dear, I want to talk to you," I said one evening. "Yes, Michael, what's wrong?" she asked, looking at me with concern. "I've noticed that you've been going to Albert quite often lately. Do you have any serious dental problems?" I asked carefully. "Oh, that," she replied with a dismissive smile. "I just want to improve my smile. A lot of people are doing it these days, and the results are amazing. So, I've been going for consultations, x-rays, and advice from Albert on how to enhance it without causing harm." "Mindy, why do you need this?" I asked, puzzled. "Your smile is already fantastic. You don't need to change anything. It seems unnecessary." "Michael, I'm still thinking about it. Let's see what can be done and how painful it will be." "I understand," I said, but I decided to probe further. "Mindy, tell me, is it really just about this?" "Well, of course. What else could it be?" she replied, her tone light. "Tell me," I said cautiously, "did Albert come to our house recently? Or did you discuss your teeth in the restaurant too?" At that, Mindy's expression changed. She seemed startled for a moment before letting out a sigh. "Now I understand everything," she said. "Richard told you, didn't he?" I nodded slightly, waiting for her to continue. "I saw him," she admitted. "I hope you didn't think anything bad. I was just bored, so I went to dinner with Albert for company. I wanted to be in a public place, but I didn't want to go alone. I learned that Albert also likes going to restaurants, so I invited him. His wife knows about it. She's in another city right now, so nothing terrible happened. We just had dinner as old acquaintances. He came to the house a couple of times, and we had coffee. That's all. Sorry for not telling you right away. I just didn't think it would bother you." "Okay, Mindy," I said, trying to sound calm. "I trust you. It's just a bit strange. You've always waited for me before, and now I hear about this. It worried me a little." "Michael, don't worry, you silly man," she said, smiling softly. "Did you really get jealous of Albert? I respect and love Albert, but only as a friend. Believe me, old men aren't my type. I have one man whom I love, and that's you." Talking to Mindy calmed me down. I genuinely thought this was complete nonsense. After all, for so many years, my life had been peaceful. My wife and I had no reason to doubt or hide anything from each other. I trusted her completely and never felt the need to question her loyalty. But recently, I started to notice small changes in Mindy's behavior that unsettled me. At first, I tried to dismiss them, chalking it up to my imagination. But soon it became impossible to ignore. Mindy was acting strangely. While she tried to maintain her usual routine, there were noticeable differences. She started coming home late from work more often or being vague about where she had been. Her moods began to swing wildly. One moment she'd be insanely happy, and the next, quiet and distant. I couldn't figure out what was causing it. I also noticed that she was texting someone frequently on her phone. When I asked her about it, she always had clever explanations. She said she was keeping up with world news and often read updates on her phone. I wanted to believe her, but the unease kept growing. I knew she was still seeing Albert, but she continued to insist there was nothing unusual about it. Despite her reassurances, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. As time passed, it became harder and harder for me to trust her. I started having troubling thoughts. What if she really had gotten too close to Albert? I knew Albert well and would never have suspected anything like this before. But now everything seemed different. Sure, Albert was elderly, but what if that didn't stop him? What if something deeper was going on? These thoughts weighed on me, consuming my mind. I didn't know what to do. Spying on my wife felt beneath me. It seemed childish and desperate. I wasn't a young man anymore, and I prided myself on being rational. But at the same time, I couldn't ignore the signs. I noticed Albert's car near our yard more often, and Mindy would casually mention that he had just given her a ride home. She rarely volunteered information, and whenever I pressed her, she'd get defensive and accuse me of being overly suspicious. She'd say I was the one who had changed. I found myself in a dead-end situation, unsure of how to proceed. But eventually I decided to take action. If I couldn't get answers from Mindy, I would go straight to Albert. I needed to get to the bottom of this once and for all. I waited for the right opportunity. Mindy had a conference coming up in another city and would be gone for a couple of days. The evening she left, I watched her board the taxi and disappear down the street. Once she was gone, I got into my car and drove to Albert's dental clinic. I knew he should still be at work, and I hoped to catch him before he left. When I arrived, I felt a small wave of relief. His car was still parked outside. I parked nearby and climbed the steps to the glowing entrance. Inside, the receptionist was still at her desk. I approached her and told her I needed to see Albert. "I'm sorry, sir," she said. "Dr. Albert is no longer here for the day." I stared at her in disbelief. "His car is still here," I pointed out, confused. She shrugged. "I don't know anything about that. He left earlier and won't be back until tomorrow." I tried to insist. "Maybe he's still here. Are you sure? Could I check? Just in case." The receptionist's tone grew stern. "Sir, Dr. Albert is not here. Please come back tomorrow." Frustrated and bewildered, I slowly made my way toward the exit, trying to make sense of what she was saying. How could Albert have left if his car was still here? Something didn't add up. As I approached the door, I noticed the receptionist step away from her desk and walk into another room. Without hesitation, I turned around and quickly made my way down the hall toward Albert's office. The door was unlocked, and the light was still on. I pushed it open, but the room was empty. No Albert. No one. I looked around, feeling more unsettled with each passing second. As I was about to leave, my eyes caught sight of something that made my heart drop. A coat hanging on the rack. It was the exact same coat my wife owned. My heart pounded as I stepped closer, my pulse racing. Could it be hers? Before I could fully process the thought, I heard noises coming from the adjacent room. A muffled voice, laughter, and something else. My stomach churned. I approached the door, trying to open it, but it was locked. Emotion boiled inside me. Anger, dread, betrayal. I stepped back and, with all my strength, kicked the door open. The force sent it swinging inward, revealing a sight that I could never have prepared myself for. It wasn't Albert. The receptionist hadn't lied. He wasn't there. But what I saw left me stunned. Mindy was lying on the table, her legs spread wide, completely caught up in an intimate act with a much younger man. A stranger. My mind raced, disbelief and rage mixing into a storm of uncontrollable emotion. "You bastards! What the hell are you doing?" I roared, storming into the room. The man scrambled, trying to pull himself together, but I grabbed him and shoved him hard against the wall. My hands trembled as I spotted a syringe with a needle on the nearby shelf. Grabbing it, I yanked off the cap and pressed it against his face. "I'm going to poke your eye out, you bastard," I yelled, the needle hovering dangerously close to his eye. "Mr. Michael, please, don't do this. It's a mistake. I'm guilty. I'm just an intern. Don't do this, I beg you," the young man stammered, his voice shaking with terror. I tightened my grip on him, my fury barely contained. The needle scratched his eyelid, drawing a thin line of blood as he trembled. Tears streamed down his face as he begged for mercy. "Talk," I growled, my voice low and deadly. "Who the hell are you?" "Jacob," the young man stammered, trembling. "I'm interning with Albert, he's my uncle. He let me borrow his car for a while." He paused, his voice shaking. "I've been giving your wife rides and, having intimate moments with her." His words hit me like a freight train, sending me into a blinding rage. Mindy, shocked and frightened, hurriedly covered herself, trembling as she stared at me with wide, pleading eyes. "Mindy, you monster! How could you do this?" I roared. "So the old man isn't to your taste anymore? Even your husband no longer fits the bill? But this little bastard, barely in his 20s, suits you just right?" Mindy was silent, unable to look at me, her lips quivering. "You've got nothing to say?" I shouted. "Michael, please forgive me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know what to say. I'm ashamed." "Ashamed?" I thundered. "Were you ashamed when you were fooling around with this bastard? And now you're ashamed. You lied to me, Mindy. You made a fool out of me. You betrayed everything we had." Tears streamed down her face as she shook her head. "Forgive me, Michael. Please, forgive me." "Forgive you?" I spat. "That's enough. I'm done. Do whatever you want. I don't care anymore. I'm filing for divorce." I tossed the syringe onto the ground and stormed out of the room, anger coursing through every vein in my body. My mind was in turmoil and I couldn't think straight. Sitting in my car, I rested my head on the steering wheel, trying to calm myself. But the rage boiled over, and I slammed my fist into the passenger seat headrest over and over again until my hand ached. That night, I drowned my sorrows in alcohol. Fueled by anger and betrayal, I packed all of Mindy's belongings into large black garbage bags, determined to rid myself of any trace of her. By dawn, I had gathered everything and set up a massive bonfire in the yard. Watching the flames consume her things felt cathartic, as though I were burning away the memories of her betrayal. When the fire finally died down, I came to my senses. I was resolute I would divorce Mindy. There was no going back. Mindy was resistant to the divorce, begging me to reconsider, but my decision was final. She tried to retaliate against me, initiating a nasty legal battle to punish me for not forgiving her. But I had a skilled lawyer who specialized in divorce cases, and we handled everything efficiently. Mindy fought to take the house, but it wasn't ours. It legally belonged to my Uncle Thomas. According to the documents, it was still in his name, and there was no way she could touch it. Despite the drawn-out legal proceedings, I prevailed. Mindy left the marriage with only what was rightfully hers. As we exited the courtroom, she shot me a bitter look. I gave her a mocking smile and flipped her the middle finger. Now, I needed to focus on the future. Life had to go on. It was hard to start anew, but I was determined to forget the past and move forward. Months later, I learned through mutual acquaintances that Mindy had fallen seriously ill. She had developed an aggressive form of cancer, and her condition was rapidly worsening. No one could help her. When I heard the news, I was conflicted. Despite everything she had done, I felt sorry for her. Yes, she betrayed me, but I didn't wish for her death. It felt like karma had caught up to her, punishing her for her actions. Still, I couldn't abandon her in her suffering. People might judge me for it, but I couldn't turn my back on someone in distress, even if that person had hurt me deeply. Helping Mindy would allow me to truly let go of the past and move on in peace. I decided to forgive her. I reached out to my childhood friend, Kevin, a renowned diagnostician. We hadn't spoken in years, but I knew he might be able to help. Kevin was glad to hear from me and promised to do whatever he could. After some time, Kevin managed to determine the correct diagnosis and treatment for Mindy's condition. The treatment worked. Mindy began to recover. When she saw me after her recovery, she broke down in tears, thanking me and apologizing profusely for everything she had done. We talked, and together we decided to part ways amicably. It was clear we couldn't go back to how things were, but we agreed to move forward separately, leaving the past behind. First, Mindy seemed to be on the right track, rebuilding her life. But then, I heard troubling news. She had started using drugs. Her lifestyle spiraled out of control. I don't know what pushed her in that direction, new acquaintances, or perhaps a radical decision to change her life, but it was a crooked and destructive path. Eventually, I learned that Mindy had passed away. Her heart gave out, and doctors couldn't save her. I felt a pang of sorrow for her, but in the end, it was her choices that led to her tragic end. One day, Albert came to see me. He looked ashamed, clearly distraught. He admitted that he hadn't known what Jacob had been doing. "Michael," he said, his voice trembling, "I didn't know. If I had, I would have stopped it immediately. I kicked him out as soon as I found out. That boy, he's ruined everything." Albert revealed that Jacob had been forging prescriptions and was addicted to narcotics. He had dropped out of school and was eventually arrested for an unsuccessful theft. He now faced a long prison sentence, with bleak prospects for his future. I didn't feel sorry for Jacob. He was old enough to know better and made his own choices. I tried to push the events out of my mind, but a fear lingered deep within me. A fear of growing old and lonely. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life alone, but I also knew it would be hard to love again. Trusting someone felt impossible after what I'd been through. And yet, after some time, fate gave me a gift. I met Kayla. Kayla was my psychologist, someone I turned to in order to deal with the aftermath of everything that had happened. From the first session, Kayla understood me in a way few people ever had. She had her own unhappy love story, one filled with pain and betrayal. Her husband had been a real scoundrel, and she had endured her own struggles before eventually breaking free. Over time, the formal boundaries of our sessions began to blur. What started as a professional relationship evolved into something deeper. We began to communicate more openly, more personally, outside of the office. I found comfort and peace with Kayla. She understood me, supported me, and gave me a sense of hope I hadn't felt in a long time. Our relationship continued to grow, and eventually we decided to be together. Kayla moved in, and suddenly, my life had light again. She filled the emptiness inside me, healing wounds I thought would never heal. With her, I found joy again. For the first time in years, I could smile without feeling the weight of my past pulling me down. It's been 5 years since everything happened, and I can confidently say that I am a happy person now. My life has moved forward, and I've built something meaningful with Kayla. Together, we've created a life full of laughter, love, and understanding. Looking back, I can't help but believe that certain events in life are destined by fate. No matter how hard we try to control things, some outcomes are simply beyond our power to change. That's what happened with Mindy. God must have seen everything, her choices, her path, and realized that she was doomed to never truly make things right. Still, I don't regret trying to save her. It was the right thing to do at the time, and it allowed me to move forward with a clear conscience. I don't carry hatred or bitterness anymore. Instead, I've learned to let go of the pain and embrace the blessings that life has given me since. Thank you for listening to my story.